Afternoon, evening, or well, I think everybody is either afternoon or evening on this call. Welcome to the fifth International Sea Scout Scuttlebutt. Um, Webster's dictionary defines scuttlebutt as a cask on shipboard to contain fresh water for a day's use. Further down in the definition, it says the term for the water source was also applied to the gossip and rumors generated around it, uh, and the latest chatter has been called scuttlebutt ever since. My name is Bruce Johnson. I think you all know me. I'm a member of the National Sea Scout Committee for Sea Scouts BSA. I'll be the host for today's meeting and we'll cover a few housekeeping rules. Since there are really so few of us on, uh, if you're able to see what's going on without um, seeing leaps and jumps and interruptions on your internet connection, then please go ahead and leave your camera on, and I think maybe we can even keep microphones on unless you have lots of noise in the background. If you have questions, you can either put it in the chat box at the bottom of the screen, or if we have just a few people, you can go ahead and ask your question. What we'll do is we have two presentations this afternoon, and then we'll have open discussion. So let's see. Um, yeah, I think what my computer is terribly confused because I've got two PowerPoints open. So let me close one of those and slideshow from current slide. Yeah, I'm gonna have to close that because it's just really confused. Okay, I apologize for this. Let's try this slideshow and okay, that looks better. Okay. So we'll start with presentations and then we'll have round robin introductions and chat and finish up. And while this is theoretically for an hour, we'll be online for as long as we have meaningful discussion today. So the two presentations we have today are on Euro C16 and restoring a classic ship. Thank you, David Raitt, for volunteering to make both of these presentations. And then we'll have our discussion. So, David, let me just minimize, I'm going to close that. And David, do you have a preference as to which one you want to do first?
No, happy to go in either order.
All right, well, why don't we start with EuroC since that was there. Um,
And it's not a starry sky. My baby told me with a sigh. Same words that came across as
Yeah,
okay.
that's it. So that's just a short video giving you a flavour of Euro C16. So before I go on, perhaps I should just introduce myself. So my name is
Mhm.
David Raitt. I'm a Sea Scout leader and commissioner in the United Kingdom, and I'm also currently chair of the Odysseus Group, which is responsible for holding the EuroSea event. For those not familiar with EuroSea, that is a meeting of Sea Scouts from across Europe with invited guests from outside Europe that runs every, hopefully, 2 to 3 years. So the EuroC you've just seen captured in the video took place in the Czech Republic in the second week of September, spread over 5 days. We had we had 70 representatives from across Europe. I'm pleased to say. It was touch and go whether we would actually be able to hold the event. Some of you may have heard about the floods due to heavy rains in Eastern Europe around that time. With 1 day to go, the local authorities finally announced it's safe for us to run the event because we were at the bottom of a dam. So unfortunately, the whitewater kayaking was too whitewater. So that was the one event that we didn't stage. But I'm pleased to say our 70 representatives all managed to eventually arrive. You'll see we spent a day sailing using the local Czech boats and sailing with Czech Sea Scouts, which was a very enjoyable day. We had some social events in the evenings for our Sea Scouters to get to know one another. And we then had a number of work sessions, workshops running during the various days. So, and there are some reports. I will try and share the link to those reports post this event because they've only just become available. So we had some sessions on sustainable sea scouting from Finland and from Lithuania. We had a general capturing of information about Sea Scouts and how they operate in 13 of the nations in Europe. We looked at how we manage risk in Sea Scouting. We looked at the place of rover scouting. So for most European countries, that's the age group 18 to 25 or thereabouts. How we look at rover scouting in Europe. We looked at some forthcoming international events that are happening in Europe over 25-26 so that we were able to share those with a wider audience. And we looked at generally how we bring education and education, particularly of a nautical style, into sea scouting in Europe and the different styles that people are used. So that was the outline of the event. Very successful event. And the next EuroC is going to be held earlier in the year in August 2026. And it's going to form part of the NOACA. For those of you who aren't familiar with the NOACA is a massive Dutch Sea Scout celebration of sea scouting that takes place roughly every 4 years. It's a fantastic event, so we're really looking forward to that in terms of the hands-on experience it's going to give people on the water, and also hopefully we're going to build on the 70 plus participants we had at this year's event.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions about EuroC? Okay. What I'm going to do is close that and open your next presentation. Okay. Slideshow. And this goes over here. Is that. And okay.
Excellent.
Hopefully I've got that right. Go ahead.
I'll just ask you to flip to the next slide as we go through. Yeah. Not just yet, but hey, we're there now, so that's fine. We'll work from this one. So, restoring a classic ship is the title of the presentation, and this project whilst being a project in its own right, forms part of a larger project which we presented at an earlier Sea Scout Scuttlebutt, and that was Request 2021. So Request 2021 was a Kent Scouts project. It was to honour the first 2 scouts selected to travel to Antarctica. And this project actually had an expedition to Antarctica with a group of combined scouts from Kent and from Scotland. The reason for Scotland is that the 2 scouts who were selected both came from Scotland. The Request project itself had a number of aims. It carried out a series of scientific projects. We published a book on the 2 scouts and the original expedition. We installed a memorial at Gilwell Park, the home of scouting in the UK, and we've developed a fund called the Request Foundation to support young people on future polar explorations. And as a further part of that was the restoration of the Lady Daphne, the ship we'll be looking at later. So if I could have the next slide, please. So these are our 2 scouts. So James Marr on my left and Norman Moody with the lighter coloured scarf on my right. What inspired the original expedition is myself and Alan, who did the previous presentation, Alan Noak. Right, yes, you got a message there. Yes, from the Cape Town Scouts Own project. Excellent. We had both read the book by James Marr on his expedition to Antarctica on board the Quest ship. Unfortunately, Norman Mooney never got to write a book. Unfortunately, Shackleton's ship, the Quest, was bought in haste and to a budget. So it wasn't quite suitable for the expedition. And it was quite a beamy ship, so a number of the crew were put off on medical advice due to severe seasickness in Madeira. So poor old Norman was one of those. But James went on the expedition, and not only went on this expedition, but subsequently became an Arctic or an Antarctic scientist in his own right. And his work on krill is still a work used in research projects. So getting back to the story, one of the things that Shackleton did, he was desperate for money for the expedition, was he arranged to sail his ship, the Quest, through Tower Bridge. So he was going to have the bascules of Tower Bridge raised, sail the boat through. It was actually in the wrong direction because he was moored downriver and didn't need to go through Tower Bridge at all, but it looked good for the press and publicity. So he sailed through, turned round, and then sailed back out. And that was on the 17th of September 1921. And the next clip, the next slide should show a video of that. So the ship here is sailing out of St. Catherine's Dock, which is just below Tower Bridge in London.
Looks like such a small ship for going to the Antarctic.
It does, yes. But it managed to house that entire crew. I can't remember its exact size off the top of my head, but I can possibly look that up later. But as part of our project, what we wanted to do is reconstruct that sailing through Tower Bridge, again for our own publicity and fundraising. And we were fortunate to make contact with the owners of a Thames barge. And here you can see the Lady Daphne. And if we can move to the next slide. So the Lady Daphne was built by the Shorts brothers in 1923, so just after Shackleton's sailing off to Antarctica. But you can get an idea of the size there. So just under 28 meters long, 85 tons. And as you'll see there, oak frames with Oregon pine spars and a steel keelson. So by the time we came to Lady Daphne, I should just point out that I mentioned that the Lady Daphne was made by Shorts brothers. And if we move to the next slide there, we can see that when Shorts brothers weren't producing Thames sailing barges, this is the other products they were making. They were famous for their flying planes. How do you combine flying planes and Thames sailing barges? The reality is that the barge business was already there, and so Short brothers simply incorporated into their aeronautics business. So by the time we got to the Lady Daphne, she had been used as a tourist boat in London for a number of years, taking people from St Catherine's Dock on tours of the river, but she was long overdue some severe restoration. And it was agreed with the owners that the scouts would put in the hours, which would then be converted into cash in terms of hiring the boat to undertake the trip through Tower Bridge with a small flotilla. So first thing we had to do with the Lady Daphne, having identified a suitable boatyard for her, and this is a creek, a very muddy creek, like most of the creeks in my part of the country, near Faversham. So we had to locate a large steel barge, larger than the Lady Daphne, so that we could then cut off the front, bring the Lady Daphne into it during a high water, then using wooden shutters, seal the front of the boat as the tide was going out, and then pump out the water. So effectively, Lady Daphne floated in a dry dock for the 2 years we were working on her. And you can see here there's a picture of the hull on blocks underneath the boat while it's in its floating dry dock. Other thing we needed to do in order to provide more workspace and to protect the decking, because some of the decking we were taking up as part of the restoration process, and restoring and recorking. So therefore we needed to put a roof over the boat as well. So you can see pictures here of the underside of the boat and the roof being put on, temporary roof. And if we could have the next slide, please. So you can see here the port quarter. The port quarter was, the wood was rotten, and so that wood was stripped off. That's the only part of the repair that was undertaken by professional shipwrights. There are limits to my scouts' abilities, good as they are. But but they were involved in the recorking. So the taking of tarred hemp rope being driven in between the planks to waterproof the boat. But also the hull was thoroughly pressure washed and scrubbed, and the internal hull was sanded and treated with a mix of Stockholm tar and linseed oil to further its preservation. Could I have the next slide, please? So all of the metalwork on the boat was descaled. That's a nice way of saying all the rust was chipped off. On other parts of the metalwork, all of the metal was stripped back to the bare metal. So all of the winches. So you can see somebody there working on one of the crab winches. You can see people in the middle taking off the spritsail boom, and in the first photograph there, people working on descaling some of the more exposed ironwork like the anchor. So that was all taken back to bare metal and then undercoated, repainted. So you can see, just looking at the crab winch picture there, the picture on the right, you can see the state of some of the decking that had to be replaced. Problem with the decking on a boat like this is, unless it's regularly soaked, by the traditional way of doing this is by pumping the bilge water over the decks. If that's not done, the decks dry out and warp, and then it also means that water gets through into the lower decks as well. Okay, next slide, please. So again, woodwork, all of the exposed woodwork was stripped bare. You can see here two people working on the burning off the paint on the rudder. You can see somebody in the middle retreating some of the winch drums with Stockholm tar, and on the far side somebody starting on the repainting of the hull. So we also replaced some of the drums on the big winches as well, so completely rebuilt them. So a really big engineering exercise. And if we could have our next slide, please. So every single block was taken off the boat, and what you see on the left is a very small selection of the blocks that are needed on a boat of this size. And you can see two of our scouts in the middle are worming and parceling up some of the wire ropes. So worming, of course, is where you have a fine line which is wound around the wire, and parceling is then with a traditional cotton tape, which is taken over the top, and then normally fixed with Stockholm tar. So idea being to protect those points at rubbing. All of the ropes on the boat were similarly treated. All of the ropes were taken off. All of the ropes were checked. If needed, ropes were replaced. That meant there was a lot of ice splicing, back splicing going on. So for a time, our people were pretty good at their splicing. And all of the blocks were stripped, dismantled, repainted, re-greased, ready for going back on the water. And then if we can have the next slide, please. So as we came to the end of the project, we also retreated the sails. Now, historically, the sails would have been treated with a mix of clay, cattle urine, and a number of other products. Fortunately, these days, most barge restoration projects use fence paint. So that's not to say it wasn't a messy job, but it wasn't quite as unpleasant as it might have been back in the 1920s. So here, after almost 2 years of work, we had COVID in the middle to contend with, which limited our operations slightly. We got to the point where we were ready to raise the mast. And if you could play the video in the next slide, please, Bruce. So after 2 years of work, we were the boat was back on the water, and we finally took her out of the creek in August of 2021, ready for our sailing through Tower Bridge on the 17th of September 1921. So 100 years to the day from when Ernest Shackleton's boat, the Quest, sailed through. The more eagle-eyed of you will notice in the video in a moment that one of the bascules doesn't open fully. Whereas if you remember from the Shackleton video, both bascules lifted fully up. In this video, one of them only partially lifts. It's because there was a problem at the time with the bascule, but we did have special permission from the Port of London Authority to go ahead. So if you could play the next video, please, Bruce. And so there we are, a fitting end to 2 years hard work, but a really great opportunity for our young people in Kent to experience traditional boating skills at a very practical level. So I'm happy to take any questions or comments that anybody might have.
Did that experience cause any of them to want to explore traditional boat maintenance trades?
Interestingly, you say that. So we had one young person who, post this event, went on to do some further restoration work with this barge as their work experience project, and then move on to looking to undertake formal training with barge restoration. We have another young person who, because of their work on this historic craft, now works as a member of the team in Chatham Historic Dockyard, which contains a number of historic ships, one of those being HMS Gannet, which is the replacement for TS Mercury, which is the boat that was used on Baden-Powell's 1909 camp, where the scouts spent part of their time on land, part of their time on the sea, which is kind of often regarded as being one of the starting points of sea scouting. So yes, a couple of them have taken on roles, and we're still actively pursuing. At the moment, Lady Daphne is further down the coast. It's just down in the West Country at the moment, but we are looking at pursuing continuing work on the Lady Daphne in the future to give people further experience in historic boats.
I don't know whether it's the case in other countries, but around here, the local marine trades are having a devil of a time finding young people who want to get into the trades and do boat maintenance or working for towing companies or serving aboard ships.
I would say that's the same in the UK as well. The number of mariners doing this sort of specialist work is very limited. It tends to be traveling groups of individuals, which make it less attractive for young people who are looking for a settled career option. Yeah.
Mhm. Are there other questions or comments about this really interesting project?
David Roy from Edinburgh, north end of the UK. Yes, David, I remember seeing Facebook reports of this a couple of years ago, and it was quite intriguing. In fact, I didn't realise at the time how big a project it was for your Explorer unit. I take it was primarily Explorer Scouts.
It was mostly Explorer Scouts, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Which is the 14 to 18th birthday age group in UK Scouting.
That's right.
Okay. Let's pull this over here.
How were your efforts financed? Did the Sea Scouts participate in the fundraising, or did the finance come by way of grant?
So the finance for the request expedition as a whole came through fundraising and from grants. We applied to a number of grant-making bodies. We received money from various Masonic lodges in the UK. We ran our own fundraising events. The restoration of the Lady Daphne was funded by the owners of the Lady Daphne. Unfortunately, we have a number of historic ships in the UK, but there is no funding attached to the restoration of historic ships. So it's a matter for any owner of a historic ship, be that be a charitable body or, as in the case of the Lady Daphne, be that individuals, to go out and hunt for funding. In the case of the Lady Daphne, it had made its restoration money by serving as a tourist, serving the London tourist trade. Basically, it was taking tourists from London out down the estuary for day trips with a small restaurant on board.
Is there any governmental agency that inspects or certifies historic ships?
So there is a National Historic Ships Register which recognizes historic ships, but it has no funding to restore ships. In terms of ships that are carrying passengers or carrying trade, yes, the National Maritime Agency carries out, has certain standards, and ships are regularly inspected in terms of their seaworthiness, lifeboats, emergency equipment, and so on and so forth. Yes, so the Lady Daphne had to comply with all of those.
Yeah, in the United States, that function would be carried out by the Coast Guard. Most of the historic vessel restoration projects that I'm familiar with in the United States are carried out by maritime museums. There are a couple in our immediate area. I live in Annapolis, Maryland, and there are a couple of maritime museums in our area that are responsible for restoring historic vessels. They typically will go out and get grant funding, and they have membership that contribute to the effort. In most cases, private individuals, well, they're just not going to get funding.
I guess that's similar in some ways to the UK. There are a number of historic ships. I guess the most famous is HMS Victory at Port Nelson's flagship at Portsmouth, which is now owned by the National Maritime Museum, and that's managed through, in part, granting aid from government, but also by going out seeking grant funding. Other historic ships like the Cutty Sark in London, that some of you may have heard of, again is a charitable trust going out seeking funding. Just close to us is the Chatham Historic Dockyard, where we will be parading for Remembrance Day tomorrow, which has a collection of historic ships. As I mentioned, the HMS Gannet or the TS Mercury being the oldest, but it has a number of submarines and Second World War warships as well, all of which again are maintained by external funding. So it's the responsibility of Chatham Historic Dockyard to go out and fund. The sailing barges, like the Lady Daphne, there are about 20 still operating. They mostly traded in the Thames and the Medway area, though some did do a little coastal trading. One or two are owned by trusts, the others are owned by individuals. And again, those that are trusts can apply for grant funding. For the others, the individuals are normally funding through commercial activity. taking people on board for trips, taking people on board for the barge races. There are 5 barge races held every year, that sort of thing. Yeah. But there is not a lot of money out there to support historic ships. In the area where I sail, but just across from where we launch, there are 3 ships piled up on top of one another. There is the Portal Narvik, which was HMS Narvik, the British command ship during the atomic tests in the Pacific in the 1950s. Sitting on top of that is the Hardy Amos, which was the last paddle steam tug in operation in the United Kingdom, built in 1921, now sitting on top of the Portal Narvik. And sunk just in front of them, it was originally floating, is a revenue cutter, which is the last surviving ship from the Spithead Review, the parade of all ships in Her Majesty's service for Queen Victoria.
So are they stored that way to save money for their space on the water?
They're certainly saving money because they're just slowly decomposing. They're all listed as historic ships, but unfortunately there just is no funding for them.
During the same time period, to sort of balance things out, what events did you participate in to sort of give your crew a sense of adventure as well as responsibility?
You mean what other things were we doing as well as when we were restoring the Lady Daphne?
That's correct.
Yep. So our young people were still actively involved with their own groups, so that with their own sailing programs, their own kayaking programs, their own power training programs, as well as the normal kind of scouting activities, camps, hikes, hill walking, and so forth.
And about how much time per week or per month did this maintenance activity take
So the
place?
maintenance activity took place roughly every 2 weeks. And we would be there from 9 in the morning till around 6 in the evening. There was a slight pause while we sorted out access during COVID and how we managed social distancing on the boat, where we did a couple of weeks where we worked every week, but generally speaking, once every 2 weeks.
If you allow me, I would like to add a comment to this presentation.
Yes.
I'm from Chile. And I'm at the Valparaiso right now. So I hope you are kind with my English.
You're doing well.
Yep.
Okay. When I hear the name Ernst Shackleton, I just remembered the story that links Ernst Shackleton with the sea story of the Chilean Navy. The expedition of the Endurance that got caught at the ice at the Elephant Island in near Antarctica
Yes.
was rescued by a Chilean sailor. I think it was in 1916 or so.
Yes, it's around that time. The First World War was still operating. The Endurance got caught in the ice, and we know the story of Shackleton having to row across to a whaling station thousands of miles away. Yeah.
Yes, and finally, a small ship went from Punta Arenas to rescue the Marines that were still at the Elephant Island and could rescue them at the very last moment that could be done, that rescue. Now, the name of that sailor, Piloto Luis Pardo, is the name of an initiative that has some institutions around the sea activity in Chile to promote the activities with young people. And some Sea Scouts are going on in Chile, are going on having some activities sponsored by this Piloto Pardo initiative that is being sponsored by some the Navy and some other institutions around the sea activity in Chile.
Oh, right. That's an interesting extra to the story. Thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
Yes.
Julio, I think this may be the first time that we've had anyone from Chile on this call. Can you tell us a little bit about Sea Scouting in Chile?
Well, it's a story. I'm somewhat ashamed to say that, to say this, but during the um, World Jamboree of 1908 that was held at England, which I attended, I met Ron Bird from New Zealand. Yeah. And he paid us a visit to Chile and he promoted the sea scouting activity because he could not believe that in Chile, there at that time, there was no sea scouting, which is true. Well, we have been trying since to have the activity of sea scouting going on around Chile. And we have had some failures, of course, but we have had some exits, some success. And there are right now two Sea Scout brigades that are working at the one at the Arica seaport in the far north of Chile, and one in a lake port of Puerto Varas, very close to Puerto Montt. Both of them are being held around a person that kindly offered his yachting, his yachts to be used by the Sea Scouts and train them in the sea activities. And they have been done very well. But we are trying to promote that the Sea Scouts learn to build their own boats so they can have something that is they feel is their own, not something that they can enjoy only. And that has been very slow. We hope that in next 2 years we will have one brigade of Sea Scouting going on in Valparaiso, and you can take my word for that.
I have the impression that there are Sea Scouts in Argentina and in Brazil as well.
Yes, yes.
Do you ever have any contact with them?
No, since we have been so such a small activity, we have not had contacts. One of the brigades, the Arica Brigade, that is now working here in Chile, is planning to attend to a South American get together of the Sea Scouts, and they will probably there meet the Argentinians and the Brazilians, and probably Colombians, Peruvians.
Do you know
They
when
do
the
have sea scouting. Hmm?
do you know when that event will be?
No, I don't have the exact dates, but it's going to be held on this summer, this southern summer.
Hmm. Okay. All right.
Uh,
Well,
I hope you forgive me for going in another direction, but
sure.
I couldn't help it.
No, that's great. Since we're light today on presentations, and I want to thank David for kindly providing us with two very interesting presentations. This leaves us with lots of time that we can talk about other things. I just wanted to make mention that we have some resource areas that support International Sea Scouts. We have a download area of files related to International Sea Scouting. And I think probably most of you are aware of the International Sea Scout Facebook group. There's also a European Sea Scout Facebook group, and some of the same posts appear in both places. But we will do whatever people would like us to do to help support this effort. I think maybe the most important thing that we're doing is just giving Sea Scouts and Sea Scout leaders an opportunity to meet one another and hear about what's going on in Sea Scouting in other places. I think we all can learn from one another and find some good ideas that appeal to our scouts that might work in other areas. So with that in mind, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing. With that in mind, I'd like to ask, would anybody like to start by introducing themselves and let us know where you're from and talk a little bit about Sea Scouting in your area? If not, I'm going to start calling names. Okay, David's hand is up. Go for it.
Right, I'm a known colleague of David Raitt. I'm in Edinburgh, Scotland. A Sea Scout by upbringing, but for the last 45 years in Edinburgh, I've been helping to run a boating activity centre aimed at helping land scouts, shall we say, to get some what we know as one of the best ways of sharing scouting and leadership and team building is through the sea or through water activities. So I'm helping run a centre on the River Forth, which is on the north side of Edinburgh, very close to the Forth Bridge, which is a railway bridge. It's about 130 years old. Yes, we've just come to the end of our summer. We've now removed all our boats from the water and yeah, lashing up and stowing, so to speak. Most of our boats are now not wooden boats. We've transitioned through to GRP, glass reinforced plastic, or pure plastic Tupperware boats. So this has vastly reduced the amount of maintenance we have to do. I think one of the problems we have suffered, and I guess David will have, well, appreciate this, COVID has taken its toll. Our centre has lost about half its adult volunteers. So we're struggling to keep going, providing the programme because of the lack of adult volunteers. I don't know how much COVID has hit the rest of the world in the voluntary sector, how you've kept going. Be interesting to hear.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Finished.
Oh, okay. Interestingly enough, Boy Scouts of America, which incidentally is changing its name to Scouting America, has lost a very substantial percentage of its membership. And at a time when what used to be called Boy Scouts, now called Scouts BSA, they've lost at least 25 and perhaps more percent of their membership, and venturing has lost over 50% of their membership. Sea Scouting has had slow but steady growth for the last 3 years, which is a little surprising, but perhaps we're filling a need that is helping us to have that happen. Would anybody like to take their next turn at introducing themselves and talking a little bit about Sea Scouts in their area? I see Alan has got his microphone on.
Yes, my name's Alan Ford. I'm the National Coordinator for Water Activities in South Africa. And I've been joined this evening here by two of our provincial water activities coordinators, Kyle Benningfield and Craig Burchell-Berger. Just two things that come to mind when David was talking about the Sea Scouts on the trip. Some of them had a voyage on the bark Europa, which normally goes down to Antarctica. And Craig organized a Scouts own service down in Cape Town for one remembrance of one of the activities. But sadly, that bark Europa, the sailing ship, she was about 115 years old. She does a lot of normally does a refit cycle in Cape Town, and she was up on the Synchrolift in the Victoria Basin, and the Synchrolift gave way and collapsed, and the ship fell over and punctured the hull. And I think she spent something like 3 or 4 months lying on her side, of the huge problem to get the insurance to pay for the repairs. And the repairs were actually undertaken by a chap called Captain Nick Sloan, who was actually the guy who sorted out the recovery of the Costa Concordia in the Mediterranean, that ship that sank. Now, Nick Sloan was one of our ex-Merchant Navy cadets from our Merchant Navy Academy. So we were very proud that he was able to take charge of the repairs. And it was a huge technical undertaking to build up this massive set of jacks around the ship and jack her back up and get her back on an even keel and get the hull plating repaired. There was quite a lot of hull damage. So, yeah, never mind the ice sinking, the Endurance, things like that. Cape Town nearly sank the ship that your Sea Scouts were doing the trip on.
Yeah.
But just the point that came up in terms of the damage that COVID has done to scouting, I think we are really suffering the consequences now. I think, like everybody, we lost a huge amount of skill. And to recover that skill and get it ingrained in the troops again so that it can be passed on is a huge problem. And we're finding that we are going to have to undertake a lot of extra training over and above our normal training curriculum to get the skill level, particularly of the scouters, back up to a standard where they can start imparting that knowledge back. And I'm very interested to hear that other countries are suffering from the same problem, that it's taken a huge knock. And I think it's going to take many years before we work that out of the system and get our skill levels back up to where they should be. And I'd be interested to hear from other countries and other representatives how they are coping with that particular problem, and maybe they can give us some ideas and support and insights into how they're doing in terms of recovering this long-term issue with COVID. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Gopi, would you like to respond and tell us a little bit about Sea Scouts in India?
Yes, hello everyone. Myself, Captain Gopi Shetty, Captain Superintendent of Sea Scouts India. I'm clear, sir, audible and visual properly? Yeah. So in India, we are doing the sea scouting since last 24 years, and we are doing well. We have got many units, and we have got our own water sports centers and other things. Basically, in water sports, we are doing kayaking, canoeing, sculling, and rowing. We are trying for sailing, but let's see when we can go through that. As far as the national organizations in India are concerned, we have Bharat Scouts and Guides, which is like affiliated to World Organization of Scouts Movement, and hence we have to work under them, but we are not getting much that support and all from our national organization. I don't know what is the reason, but uh, we don't get that much support or other things from the national organization. They treat us like Sea Scouts are something different. We don't know what they do and all. And secondly, what I feel is that the Sea Scouts uniform and activities are so attractive that they may be worried that if Sea Scouts develops much more, then the other may join Sea Scouting instead of their scouting. This might be a narrow-minded thinking, but doesn't matter. We are doing our level best. And in the last national jamboree, Sea Scouts were invited with a special invitation. So that is a good thing compared to other activities in India, especially in scouting. So slowly, they are also giving a response. But let's see in future how much they'll support us. But what I personally feel is that internationally we should have one small association of all Sea Scouts countries, and that WASM should also support us. That will give a good support, like our Sea Scouting units or organizations. Which will force the national associations to cooperate us and help us. That's it, sir. Over to you.
Thank you, Gopi. I think your comment about lack of support from our national organizations, that's not a problem unique to India. Um, I think several of us here might nod our heads in agreement that that's a challenge for us in our own respective countries. Um, Speaking only for myself, I assume nothing from in the way of support from our national association. And if we have success, we know why we have success. It was because of our hard efforts and our good kids. And we're doing this for the young people who we serve. So um, Jose, would you like to give us an update on where you are with your Sea Scouting? And I think you all know Jose, but introduce yourself, where you are and what you do.
Yes, I am José de Parvanche, Valencia, and I am in Valencia, Spain. And since I came to Europe, I started to work on Transatlantic Council, Scouting America, Sea Scouts, and other scouting activities, trying to promote sea scouting in Europe for the USA Scouts in Europe and other countries from Transatlantic Council. We started having a group, a small group that started to grow in Dubai and Germany, but suddenly they started to shrink. We have only a few in Germany, Scotland, and Kenya. We have a Sea Scout in Kenya. But the issue with the scouts in Europe and Transatlantic Council, and they are from military family, expats, and normally they have a lot of rotation. So it's very hard to keep the scouts, especially in the older ages. Remember that as different as the UK and other countries, sea scouting in the US started like at 13, 14 years old and older. And before that, the scouts are more interested in getting an Eagle Scout. So it's a big culture in the US that they want to achieve that rank because this is very important in the US. Here in Spain, I have not been very successful with promoting Sea Scouts in Spain. There's only 3 groups, and they are all the Mediterranean Atlantic coast. They're more interested in local land traditional scouting. But I always say that we are the last soldiers or the last sailors of the Sea Scout cause. And this is why I went to Greece, to the Eurosea, to be able to know more about European. I was not able to go to Czech Republic. I will try to go to the next one. But at the same time, and I agree that some of you will agree with me, it's time to invite the next generation of Sea Scouters to this meeting. And it's good to see that when I see black hair or only hair, and I see ladies here joining us, means that we are now in what we call the golden age, right? That means that we cannot sail, we cannot pull a rope. It's very hard for us, so we need the next generation of Sea Scouters. Finally, I am also interested in supporting Latin America Spanish-speaking Scout Marinos like Mexico, Ecuador, Peru, Argentina, and now Chile, because I'm gonna be connecting with Julio to know more about Chile. I have very good friends scouting in adult scouting in Chile. So this is what I'm doing. I always say that I will be the last Sea Scouter in Europe in the BSA in Scouting America or whatever is the name. And now I'm using my new uniform that is I call it my European uniform. It's the same shirt, but I can roll use for winter here in Europe. For the European activity, it's very light. It's not like the very heavy uniform that you use in the United States. That when I went to Greece, it was very hot to wear the uniform. So I expect now to be able to be lighter and still promoting Sea Scout. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you. Um, Roger, I haven't seen you in, I want to say about 15 years or so. Um, are you able to help out with the Sea Scouts in Connecticut? You're still in Connecticut, are you?
Yes, I'm still in Connecticut. It's kind of a long story. If you want me to introduce myself, I'd be glad to do that.
Sure.
In 1963, I made Eagle Scout, and I saw Sea Scouts in my town, and I said, "That's my next target." And I enjoyed it greatly. We had a 26-foot yawl and a motor whaleboat, and uh, within 2 years, I was a quartermaster Sea Scout. I graduated from high school, went to Columbia University, and joined NROTC there. And 4 years later, I was in Vietnam as a SEAL officer. I on in discharge on expiration of my tour or my service, I went to law school, and some years later, my 10-year-old son had was a not 10-year-old. I guess he would have been 13-year-old. Made Eagle, and I said, You interested in Sea Scouts?" We already belonged to a yacht club, so there was no big jump there. And his younger sister got into Sea Scouting too. And before I knew it, I was a skipper. We had a 30-foot, 38-foot yawl, and one of the biggest problems is where if you live in coastal U.S., it's more expensive. everything is more expensive. And hardware, if it has the name marine before it costs 25% more. So Sea Scouting is always has a problem in financing itself. And there's a conflict in that whatever kind of ship or boat you get, it can only handle a certain number of people. And so you recruit a full crew and you can't get them to recruit any more because they don't want to get pushed out, or they want to have the boat as they take possession of the boat in attitude. And if it gets too many kids, um, you, it doesn't work. So it's a real roller coaster. You get a full crew for several years and then they all graduate. It's hard to feather them in and get them to come in and in any sort of uh, even way. So the big problems are it can't work like Boy Scouting. Boy Scouting has very little money in in tents, and that's about it, and some other equipment. But Sea Scouts, if they're really hitting on all six cylinders, they've got something that they can sail regularly, at least here in the U.S. So I had I thought a pretty productive 10 years or so as a skipper and as a Commodore. Then I still remained in the Naval Reserve, and I was called up for Afghanistan in 2001. I turned over everything to the committee, and after I came back from Afghanistan, there wasn't any ship. It was in the the boat was in the yard with a $2,000 bill that the council handed me and said need to be paid. And I said I'd resigned a long time ago. And anyway, I was very disappointed in the parents, and I was very disappointed in the council. Since I've still had my ties to the sea, uh, I I'm an outrigger canoe racer, and I did help a group that had promised as a Sea Scout ship, but they were just thinking in terms of scouting. And I taught them how to handle a six-man outrigger canoe. I've raced in the Molokai race and the Blackburn race many times. I still have about 80 feet of kayaks and outrigger canoes in my garage. I'm retired from the Navy now as a captain with 35 years service, both in Vietnam and Afghanistan.
And you bring up something that we've been seeing an awful lot of in Sea Scouts in the United States over the last 5 to 10 years. A lot more Sea Scout units are getting involved in paddlecraft. It gives more flexibility because the cost of getting into that is very low. In fact, there are an awful lot of paddlecraft, kayaks, canoes, stand-up paddleboards that are available to borrow or to purchase at next to no money. And it's a little more scalable than a 37-foot sailboat. That 37-foot sailboat will only fit so many teenage bodies. And beyond that, it just isn't working unless you get another boat. And that means twice as much maintenance and twice as much cost for having slip space and all of the good stuff that BOAT break out another 1,000. Is that something that anybody else has heard? for
If I can come in there, Bruce,
yeah. Mhm.
I would say that in the UK, probably the water activity that it is most undertaken by both Sea Scouts and Land Scouts who have a water activity program would be canoeing or kayaking.
Mhm.
Um, there are lots of Sea Scout groups who only do kayaking. Um, but the thing that we have seen more recently, of course, is apart from traditional kayaks and canoes, is now people are moving over to open kayaks, i.e., sit on kayaks. And what's become enormously popular recently is stand up paddle boards.
Mhm.
And as the technology has changed around stand up paddle boards, rather than just things that were being used on flat rivers, you're now starting to see people using those in more challenging environments, either on the sea or in moving water.
Well, I think this is reflecting a change in recreational boating. The U.S. Coast Guard maintains statistics on what sort of boats are being used. And over the last 10 years, the number of sailboats has more or less stayed constant. The number of power boats has dropped precipitously. And at the same time, the number of paddlecraft of one sort or another, and it's mostly kayaks and stand-up paddleboards, has just gone through the roof. People can go to their local sporting goods store or marine supply store, and they can get a kayak for not much money. And even if the store doesn't know much about boats, they'll sell the kayak as, oh, well, you don't need to know anything to operate this. And of course, the consequences of that are obvious. The boating accident statistics reflect a huge rise in accidents that involve kayaks and stand-up paddleboards. And that's both a function of there are a lot more of them, and there are a lot more operators of those boats who don't know what the heck they're doing. They just thought, they put their credit card down on the desk, they bought their boat, and that's all they need to know. They go out on the water, they have a good time, probably bring a six pack with them so that they can really enjoy the water, and they do some stupid things.
There was one program or one uh, organization that was a manufacturer. That's the word I need. Had developed some outward bound fiberglass boats for sailing camping. And
Mhm.
what you do is you eat, if you're taking a trip someplace, you beach every few miles, and you can row or sail in that boat. And I cannot remember the name of that model, but it was a French Canadian name. Uh, and I often thought, if I had to start all over again and I could find myself a sugar daddy, what I would have gotten was one of these, and I suspect the boats were somewhere in the 20-foot length, uh, as opposed to an outrigger, which is 40 feet. And you just uh, you paddle. Now with the boats they had, you could also sail, which I think is a perfect uh, adventure and reliability. You don't want to be stuck with a bunch of high school kids who have to be at school Monday and there's no wind. Uh, but anyway, that's what I've often thought of. I'd get some outward bound style boats, a little more teenage adolescent friendly, and rent them out or something, and maybe get them a trailer, and that would be the end of the expenses, and the maintenance would be low. So my pipe dream.
Well, the Sea Scout program in our country has been partnering with the American Canoe Association to get instructors to help out with Sea Scout paddlecraft and instruction. We have mixed success with that because those instructors are doing it to make money. And some of them are going to be more inclined to either do it for free or reduce the price for scouts. Some are not, but they're also developing instructional materials that are aimed at scouts. You can't necessarily use materials that are intended for 40-year-olds when you're teaching a 14-year-old how to do kayaking or stand-up paddleboarding. I see we have a few more people on the call who haven't spoken. Does anybody want to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about what's going on in their area? Stunned silence.
What I would say, if I can, to respond
Mhm.
to Roger, if I just move out of the way, the boat you can see in my picture is 18 foot 9 inches. You can sail it, you can row it, and it'll also take an outboard. So they're a Drascombe lugger, 18 foot 9 inches in glass fiber, though I think they are very common in the States as a wooden self-build. Um,
Hmm.
but excellent boat for scouts for exploring. They'll sail in 10 inches of water, so you can explore little creeks, pull them up onto the shore, demast them, take them through canal systems. So maybe that's what you need in your life, Roger, a Drascombe.
Well, as
Well,
we said, I've got 80 feet of outrigger canoes and kayaks, and a klepper too. So I'll have to talk to my wife,
Yeah.
see if I can get permission.
I can think of a number of Sea Scout leaders whose backyards look like used boatyards.
Yes.
Yes. Jose is saying that's what his yard looks like.
Oh,
And
Well,
David,
Um,
yeah.
David Waite's
Mm.
choice of boat, 18 foot or so, you can get up to 5, 6, 7 perhaps persons on board, and we'll recognize the number of 5, 6, or 7 as being a patrol, which is the fundamental working unit of scouting. And with that sort of sized boat, you can get a patrol on the boat, and with a patrol leader as captain, and give them real leadership opportunity. My centre also has a couple of Drascombe's, and they are truly excellent. But we haven't yet been able to, because we have a central facility as opposed to a working troop. We haven't been able to train. We don't get enough people to be there coming regularly enough to actually take on becoming the skipper. So we've always got an adult skipper on board. But in terms of general sea scouting, it's a good patrol boat where the captain of the boat is the captain, and really develops the patrol system and the individual's maturity.
Interesting.
I,
Sorry, yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Interesting you mentioned the patrol system there. It's a shame we don't have any callers from the Netherlands on here, because they have the great little steel boats, the Lilliflats, which can be sailed, can be rowed, can be sculled, and they are ideal patrol boats. And that's how they're used in the Netherlands. Yeah.
And they have a substantial fleet of them that they've built up over many years. They're all hand-built, they're steel-hulled. And I distinctly remember watching them build one at the 1995 World Jam, was it 95 or 94? The World Jamboree in the Netherlands. And they, yeah, so imagine, but their boating conditions in the Netherlands are pretty uniform. It's not like, for example, in the United States, where what we do on the Chesapeake Bay would necessarily work in the San Francisco Bay with very different boating conditions. Our typical boats on the Chesapeake are sailboats from 26 to 34 feet. And they all have to be shoal draft because a substantial amount of the bay is 6 feet or shallower, 2 meters or shallower. Whereas the San Francisco Bay is deep and is very windy year round. So they have much larger boats. All right.
Bruce, can I just ask you a question? What happens with sea scouting, let's say in the Midwest, places which are many thousands of miles from the coast? Is it functional there on the lakes or even large water reservoirs? Places like that, Lake Tahoe, for instance, just something that comes to mind.
Well, let me step in here, Bruce, introduce myself. I'm Pete Sargent. I'm here in Central Texas, so I am a good 5 hours from the closest coast, which happens to be the Gulf Coast, but it's coast. We have inland lakes, we have inland rivers. In my own council here, we have 7 ships. 6 of them are paddlecraft, though 2 of them do have some 20-foot boats as well. And one of them is a scuba ship. Right? So they do, their primary focus is scuba diving, which, if you want to talk about Roger dollars spent, think about, you have to have a master diver along as an adult when the kids go scuba diving in this country. Now, I know, looking at the Budweiser badge on your back wall there, that's probably not a problem for you, but finding master divers in Central Texas is an interesting exercise. All right. But we do that. We have ships in Kansas. Now, if you want to talk about the central United States, go to Kansas. Rivers. They're doing paddlecraft on rivers, right? As Bruce said, sailing conditions are different between all the coasts. I mean, the Gulf Coast is probably closer to the Chesapeake in terms of its sailing, because we don't go out into the deep water unless you are a serious blue water sailor, because you're going to run into offshore oil rigs and things like that and other things going on. But back to Roger, I mean, I grew up as a youth on Cape Cod. I did blue water sailing with my grandfather from the time I was like 7. And then when I moved to Central Texas for work, I'm going, where's the water? And they showed me a slake, which is, by the way, running dry right now because we're under drought conditions in Central Texas.
Exactly the opposite to how things are in Jose's area.
Right.
And Jose, I hope you are staying dry.
Yes, well, you have seen the news about the flooding. We are north of that part of Valencia,
Oh.
so we are really safe. Only
Okay.
sunlight, right? But south of Valencia is amazing. Very terrible how things happen because of the flooding.
Jose,
Well, that's great.
I have to tell you, your conversation about uniform. We don't even buy the normal uniform in Central Texas. If you've ever seen,
I
this
agree.
is
You know?
this is
But-
this is this was designed. This is actually a repurposed law enforcement uniform.
Well, yes, and I also remove part of the patches because they say that we look like a Christmas tree. So we go to a European event. I also have to remove these things and remove so we look more European style with less patches.
Whoa!
Oh, what happened?
What happened? Oh,
I think Alan's chair
leaned back and
inclined.
his mic was open. Yeah.
Yes.
Bruce, Craig
Well,
has his hand up.
Yeah,
Did you
I'm
notice that?
sorry. Oh, okay.
Yeah, Craig has his hand.
Craig. Yeah.
Good evening, ladies and gents. By form of introduction, my name is Craig. I'm the regional coordinator for water activities in the Western Cape, South Africa. By day, I'm a commander in the South African Navy, and in my after hours time, I lie all the time. I'm a scout and have been a scout since I was 7, and I now head up, as I said, water activities in the Western Cape. We have a wonderful facility in Lakeside, and we have several Sea Scout troops from the region that have boat sheds and dinghies, and also canoes, kayaks, located at the Sea Scout base. And our predominant vessels that we use is Soldana dinghies. They are, I think they're 4.75 meters sliding gunter rig. And they are able to be sailed, they're able to be rowed, and we have never tried to put an outboard on the back, but I'm sure it can be done. But we also sail in a lagoon and also in the sea. We've also taken the boats to our large inland dams, and versatile boat for training. We can fit about between 5 and 8 scouts per boat. Once again, it ties in with the patrol system. And I thought that would just be my slight introduction from here in Cape Town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for introducing yourself. Anything else that we'd like to cover today? I want to mention that we've missed the last two. This was meant to be an every 6-month event, and the next 6-month or last 6-month, we've missed those events. The premise being that they would be held at a time of day that would not require our friends in Australia, New Zealand, and Oceania to get up in the middle of the night to join us, and they haven't happened. I think this time of day works pretty well for all of us who are on this, with maybe the exception of Gopi. What time of night is it for you, Gopi?
Now it is almost 2:15 in the night.
Right, right. So yeah, it's 3:30 in the afternoon for us, and our friends in the UK, it's I guess 8:30 or thereabouts. So, and I'm guessing Chile, would you be this would be 2:30 maybe for you?
17:30,
17:30.
5:30 p.m.
Oh, okay.
Remember South America, Bruce, that part of South America actually sticks further east than you might think, unless when you look at the
Okay.
globe.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, do we want to try for 6 months from now? Um, if so, I'd like to ask somebody else to organize it. Holly and I are going to be traveling in Europe at the end of April and the first half of May. So we're not going to be available to organize something at that time. If somebody else would like to organize it, that would be great. Lots of people's hands are going up saying, oh, yes, please let me do that.
I certainly have a Zoom account, so I could possibly do that. I've done that before, haven't I, Bruce? So
Well, I
Yes,
could,
you have.
yeah, and David, I'm perfectly willing to do what I'm doing now because this is actually my Zoom account we're actually using.
all right, yeah. Mhm.
So I'm perfectly willing, and as Bruce will attest to, I do a lot of this for the Sea Scouts in the U.S.
Mhm.
at least monthly, if not twice a month.
Yeah, Peter has a more robust subscription that has more capabilities than what I used to have access to.
Yeah.
So he's willing to help out as well. But we really need to have somebody who will coordinate this and kick people in the behind to get presentations in. I think the discussion is very useful, but having presentations about what's happening in our respective countries is also very informative. So I think I'm hearing David raising his hand.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. And Peter is offering to help with the technology end of that. So maybe what we'll do is we'll leave it up to David to propose some dates and see if we can't find a date that will work for most people. Um, Actually, earlier in April might be better. I don't know about the rest of you, but early April is still early in our boating season.
Mm.
Uh, and it might mean that fewer people are actually on the water or just about to get on the water.
That seems like a good idea to me.
And for Julio, he's winding down his boating season at that time. Same with Craig, I would guess. You're in your uh, spring and summer months coming up.
Yes. We actually find that we don't pack our boats away. We continue to do boating activities through winter, but we just have to be mindful of the weather, and it takes a little bit more planning. But we continue. We don't pack our boats away.
Okay.
Well,
All
in
right.
Chile,
Yeah, sorry.
we do more or less the same. In Chile, the winter time has no snow practically throughout the whole country. Only in the very far south part, they do have snow, so we can go on with our boating activities uh, throughout the whole year. Of course, you have to be careful with the weather because but that also includes summer because there has been some events of very high wind in this
Sure.
last year, and that is very difficult to deal with.
All right. Anything else for the good of the cause?
Well, Bruce, we have one person that just joined us. I don't remember seeing him before, Paul Austin.
You want to introduce yourself, Paul?
Yeah. Hi, you guys. Just as not been to one of these before, I just thought I'd say hello. Sea Scout leader with 4th Gingham Sea Scouts. And just as the meeting was about to start, someone turned up at our door and then kept talking. Couldn't get rid of him. So, but I see David Rate is here, and our base is a few hundred meters from David's base on the River Medway. I know David. Yeah, so nice to meet you guys.
And Paul, I think I recognise, well, but know the name, is Ray Austin a relation or father or? I'm ex-Fourth Gillingham when I lived in the Medway towns.
Oh, we've met on Facebook, haven't we? You're in
Yeah.
Scotland somewhere, aren't
Scotland,
you?
Edinburgh. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Ah, right. We finally meet virtually. Good day to you.
Excellent.
Yeah. Excellent.
Well, for anyone on this meeting who does Facebook, please make a point of joining the International Sea Scout Facebook group. And Peter, I hope you're capturing the chat. I saw some links to other resources that we want to make sure that we preserve and make available to everybody.
I always capture the chat, Bruce.
Okay. Well, thank you all for coming today. It was very worthwhile to see you all, and I appreciate everything that you're doing for our young adults. We are making a difference, and we're offering our young people an opportunity that they may not have in other phases of scouting. So you're doing a great job, and thanks so much for your efforts on behalf of the kids. Take care.